welcome to the Quarantine Room podcast. I'll be your host, Vince Salsone, and I'll be joined by my co-hosts.
I'm Maurice McGlynn.
Kyle Silvestri.
Eric Castellanos.
Mazabini Yasmin, and I will be going into the forensics topic. We basically see the forensic science in TV shows and how the depth goes into it, but we don't really know the importance of it. And forensic science started a long time ago where the Chinese used fingerprints to establish the identity of documents and clay sculptures. And we use this now to identify any crime scenes and homicides, abductions, burglary, and attacks that happens with victims. But we don't really know how the intricate of it goes on. This goes into how we see it in TV, because in TV we just see normal characters almost always all the time, white characters playing in a doctor or a scientist who just says like how the homicide had taken place, but we don't know what was the importance of the forensic that they took. This is why the interest comes in, because the importance of it is really in depth, and it's very difficult for real life forensic scientists, and that's how we can contribute to it.
I mean, okay, I have a question actually for forensics. Do you consider like cameras, like security footage, like part of forensics as well? Because that's also evidence. Would you like
Yeah, of course.
consider that? Okay.
It's anything that would show how something happened. So like CCTV cameras, pictures, like a mud stain on something. That's all that would correspond into the idea of forensics.
Anything that could help, like solve the case, that would be considered
Anything
forensics.
from the crime scene, anything around it, and like that. So cameras would take into it.
Yeah, and it's stuff like I don't know if you've ever heard like, oh, he has gun residue on his hand, things like that. Like it's like stupid stuff basically that like is kind of ridiculous. That would,
help you solve a case.
yeah, stuff
Little
like that.
Clues and things.
The
or
twig,
as they
this
wanna call
twig
them,
is broken
hints.
right here.
Yeah, it's basically a bunch of assumptions, and they just have
Yeah,
to find
For
things
the most part.
that correspond with what their assumption is.
But then, like, what they just like, I know they would use gloves, like carry the evidence around, but like, I never understood like how cases like like those rape cases people made like about to like some sort of star, and like it's like a really old. I never knew how those cases worked. Like,
Oh,
how do
They
they
just
get
Well,
past?
once
DNA.
it's old, you can't really prove it,
They're called cold case
Unless,
files.
yeah.
Yeah, they're called
Because,
cold
like-
cases because none of the evidence is, there
To like
anymore.
really meet a conclusion that you could really, or like to close the case.
Yeah.
With like old rape cases and old murder cases, it's because like if they lose like any semen samples, any blood samples, any DNA samples, or they can't really do anything else with it,
yeah,
They can't
So the
get that.
case is just closed
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
due to a lack of evidence or a lack of
The destruction of evidence.
anything.
Like over
Yes.
time, basically. They're like there was a show that was all about cold case files at one point, and it was like they would just like reopen them and they'd be like, oh yeah, it's super obvious. It was like the husband that killed the wife. Like it's simple. Like they were always arguing all the time. It's documented.
But it's really not.
But then at the time they were like, I don't know what that means. Case closed. Because it's what like
Got it.
72 hours. Like for like missing persons is 72 hours.
Yeah.
And they're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I
What do you
believe
mean
so.
2 hours?
and they after 72
Or you
hours,
can
like
report it.
yeah, if
Oh.
somebody
Yeah.
if somebody
Oh
reports
yeah,
it,
and also 72 hours you can like
Yeah.
the likelihood of them being found just like
Is
dramatically
basically
decreases.
zero.
Yeah.
they're
Yes.
like, we don't know where they could have gone, anywhere,
Because I know you could report a missing persons like before a day.
something
Yeah,
like
you
that.
Well,
can
that's if they're, like,
report
a
it,
kid,
but
though.
It's
Yeah.
like the investigation for long, like 3 days at least. Like
What
is,
for
like,
them to close
They're
it.
just like, sorry, we can't find them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
literally.
Honestly, that is
If they
how it is.
find the missing person, they claim it as they died.
Yeah.
Or they just
Yeah,
They just
They
because
vanished.
well,
Yeah.
Well,
They just
but
don't
vanished,
continue
they have to
looking
put
for them.
down, like they died because you can't like do anything.
Yeah,
with them
exactly. Because
anymore.
unless they have leads on it, they can't
Yeah.
And after like
because-
that 3-day time span, it's like, what leads are we gonna find? Like if there's blood, that's probably contaminated by now.
Yeah.
As the
Exactly.
reason, like the reason why it's 72 hours, I'm not totally sure. I'm pretty sure it's a mix between like evidence can be tampered with or destroyed in that amount of time, like bacteria in some cases could
Or
be like,
placed in a certain way.
yeah,
Things
exactly,
like that.
or
Yeah.
stuff could be moved
Manipulated. There you go.
basically. And then it's also like, well, there's no way to track somebody for 72 hours basically. Like especially if they don't have their phone on them or it died or whatever the case may be. There's no way to find them. It's just
Like,
Yeah.
if there's
And it's like the amount of
multiple
places.
people.
Yeah.
Oh,
like,
yeah, absolutely.
Like the
Multiple
victim
people
had
too, yeah.
multiple contact with
Yeah.
people.
there's no way to tell.
Then he
That
leaves a
even makes
trail.
it-
He or
exactly.
she leaves a trail. So there's a
But, like,
pattern for
there's,
them to
like,
follow.
So much, like so many people to go through.
There's like
I
a
mean-
oh, yeah.
Oh no, go ahead.
So yeah, I was just gonna say there's like this thing to where it's like a known thing with people who are in like the forensics or like kind of like the police kind of aspect of society. It's if somebody is like known to be taken and then like their first location was found out, if they were moved to then a second location, the chance of finding them is like less than 50%, and then if they move again, it's 0, or it's like 1%. Like it's you would assume a trail, in like the current time would be like, oh, he's right here. His phone's on right here. There he is. That's not the way it works, apparently. It's, kind of ridiculous.
No. I mean, the only way they can really trace things like that is if there was like something like really, really important left behind, But even then,
Even
it's
with
kind
that,
of
like
hard
it's
when
still
the
difficult.
kidnappee is like moved. Yeah. Like
Yeah,
we
and
can
then
watch it.
finding like, the location and everything, that's even more hard.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
And like movies make it so dramatic and romanticize it, but it's really not. That's not how it works. You can't just happen upon this miracle of finding something and piecing it together. Like,
Yeah.
oh, suddenly everything works. No, it's a process. Not everything goes like how the movie is gonna go. This is the real life. This is reality.
yeah.
It's not always perfect.
Like in most police cases, they generally don't find like the criminals or are able to really close the case. It's usually like cold cases, or they just close the case as like an unsolvable thing. There are like a plethora of those cases throughout the country, especially like older, because it's like forensic
Yeah.
scientists has like evolved, especially like with the introduction of technology
Yeah,
and
definitely.
cyber forensics and stuff. At the beginning we were talking about like cameras, CCTV. We also have geo tracking now, and like our phones. All those
And
are like,
like,
things to show locations.
yeah, that's
know?
more common now. But like, if we're gonna go back, let's go back to the 60s. Not things like what we have, like walking around with phones in our pocket all the time, with video cameras, things like that. That wasn't always common. Well, it wasn't
Yeah.
common at all,
Yeah, at all.
right? Up until like what?
The 90s,
The,
the
the 90s
early
at the very,
2000s.
at the very least, the 90s.
around to the 90s. Yeah. So it makes things very difficult, and it made cases so much harder because they don't have a trail.
Well-
Even now,
So-
even with all the technology we have now, we don't really have that much of a trail,
Yeah.
Or they didn't know what to look for.
But let's say like there wasn't any like
Which made
digital like
things-
stuff, like technology or anything. Like it's so hard and like interesting that people have to like take it to like a lab and everything to like find the results, wait it out and
I
everything.
mean, would there be a lab at that time if there's no like
Yeah,
digital?
there were
Yeah,
labs
yeah,
at the time.
definitely.
There were labs.
It's just
These are
collections
more
Just
of
be like-
advances now.
You put the magnifying glass and be like footprints.
No, it's well, yeah, but
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
It's more like they would keep like, let's say if they found like a finger, they would keep that in like a jar of formaldehyde. That's all that it would be. It would be like, ooh, look, and there's some dirt underneath the nail. Look, there it is. Oh, this dirt is from Samoa.
We
It's
got
like
'em.
it's basically stuff like that. But then going back to what like Emery's was saying, if you killed somebody like before like the 50s, you probably would just get away with it. Like it would.
You definitely get
There's
away.
no way that they would be able to find you unless you were still there when you killed the person. Like that just shows how many cases have just never been solved. There are probably
Like,
hundreds of
forensic
thousands of
stuff?
cases like that.
Came in like the 1700s. So like in 1500s they didn't even know that exists like fingerprints and stuff. they didn't even know like you could do that.
Well,
So
even
they were
even in
like
the 1700s,
case closed.
they knew about it.
Yeah, and like still, even then, they still had like a hard time like doing the
I
fingerprints and
mean,
stuff, and
look
then
at
DNA
Bonnie and
evidence.
Clyde. They were
Bonnie and Clyde.
famous,
Okay.
right? Because
Yeah.
it was so hard to like track them down.
Yeah, say like
Not even well,
yeah.
like look,
With most
that's why they
stuff
were
like that, it
famous
was like
because
that.
they didn't have enough what do you call it, technology, or they didn't have the well the necessities at the time to hunt these two down. You know?
Yeah. Basically, you know, it's kind of funny to think about that that's just the way it was. It was like you could just do whatever you want basically and get away with it. And then now it's like, nah, though. We know your size 8 shoe was at the scene of the crime. Look, there's mud on it. Stuff like that. So
Right?
like it's a
You can't walk into a bodega without, you know,
yeah,
a
without
camera on you.
of course.
Yeah.
So it's like you know, turn the subject into like a more like common like now time instead of being like, you know, oh it's
Back in the day.
1700s. Yeah. You know, forensics has like most things. There's a lack of appreciation and like the amount of colored people or people of color. I'm sorry, people of color and women, of course, obviously, as it always has been, always will be. Hopefully not.
Yeah.
But in the case of forensics, most agencies were like in before like even the 2000s was mostly men and mostly white men, as you would assume, obviously. And then as time went on, more people of color started being recruited into the agencies or were allowed to join or whatever. And then the population of women also grew. Um, all this again took way too long to happen, and if it was done sooner, the field wouldn't be so overpopulated by white men of probably a certain age range, I would say. Um, you know, take it away.
Oh yeah, actually, I want to add on to this because my topic or like a website I got was from Stanford. It talks about like why diversity is pretty important in like any field work. It's because like you have like instead of having one group of people or like that are like all have the same thought process, you could have people from different races and they all have their own thoughts and like different views of how things should break down. So my topic actually talked about that. Like it was like if you have a group of people who talk the same way, it's harder for things to be achieved. While you have more people like with different ideas and how they like break down stuff, it's easier since you won't have people who are closed minded and like simply like closed minded makes things harder. While you have people with open minded thoughts, it could be easier for the forensics field. Like you could probably solve more cases that were like probably unsolvable back then. Just like I don't know.
Yeah, and what do you call with that? I want to continue on because like the source that I had, it was something about it was about including culture into forensics, right? So you know how people from different cultures respond to things differently or like see things a bit differently. So like if we include that, like how we would say like the opinion of a woman or the opinion of a black man would be different than the opinion of a white man who is studying a black victim, right? Let's just say if this person is from such and such culture, they'll have more background or um, a better understanding of what background they come from, and it'll like give them not an edge, but it'll help them understand their actions and experiences a bit more. Say like if they're more reserved or if they're more open about things, or like what they would do prior to, getting killed. Just per se. But that's all I really wanted to add. So
Yeah, so
if you have
like
any questions.
there's like
What's that,
oh
Alan?
okay, thanks.
Oh, sorry.
No, Eric,
You
you can
can.
go. It's a worry.
Oh, all right. So I was gonna, because like I kind of like I don't agree with like the cultural thing because it's like if you're looking at like pure science and like you're trying to find these criminals, like yeah, like you should try to think like of a different perspective. of these people, but like not every black person has the same perspective, you know. Not every Spanish person, every white person, every like woman has the same perspective as another woman. So it's like it's like really do it. You need to empirically look at like the evidence. You need to empirically look at and all the evidence that's given to you.
No,
You
no,
know,
like
you have
of
to
course.
make assumptions based off of that.
But
Okay, but like what? Oh, but what I was saying was that like, sorry, Vince. Like the value of adding to culture includes like having a better understanding of the origins of behavior and like the level of violation and intent the accused individual's behavior. You know, like if
Well,
that
yeah,
makes
no,
sense.
I get what you're trying to say, but like I don't think it's more so like understanding behavior of like different people. I think it just should be like allowing opportunities for different people, you know, not like behavior like of of like the criminals or the victims, but I mean like the allowing opportunities for like people who like want to actually pursue this like job, you know.
well, surely
I
like those people would also just be better at solving cases for those people, right? Like in some way, maybe not like a major way. Maybe more
maybe I
like
mean
a minute like, oh well, they would know, like, I don't know. Like I said when I was muted to the recording,
uh,
like how, like a woman might know how like she killed her husband, right? Like a female agent might know how a woman would kill her husband, like, oh, with like with some poison in his wine glass or something like that. Like instead of it being
yeah,
like, oh, she stabbed him. Well, no, she wouldn't do that. Why would she do that? That seems more like something like, a man would
A
do.
guy would
Yeah,
do
exactly.
yeah.
Something
because
like that.
So what? There's sexism and like
Of
never
course,
like.
in everything. Yeah,
Well,
of
yeah, there's
course.
sexism and racism, like bias,
I mean,
implicit bias that's placed upon like different structures or groups of hiring. It's something that like a lot of people agree upon,
Definitely.
you know.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I was just like thinking like it's kind of sucks that like that they're bringing that like employment for jobs for like just based on their sex and like their race and age. That's like really fucked up. Like
Well,
it shouldn't matter.
language, Kyle.
Oh yeah.
It shouldn't matter. I do agree, but it's also like you have to think about the time period when this was happening, right? Like, yeah, in the 2000s, as I said earlier, the rate in, people of color, women, that all went up. All of that went up in the whatever. But before that, I mean, like forensics was a thing when like slaves were around. So obviously they wouldn't have people of color working then.
True.
So, it's kind of like, would that have helped
well,
then?
yeah,
Who knows?
It was gonna
Probably.
be racist and sexist,
Yeah, at
so
some point.
you know.
It's
yeah,
yeah.
but it's like now though, like you know,
No,
we still
yeah.
have like a massive like
I mean, you could still
underrepresentation of
see it like on some occasions. There are always gonna be people who are gonna be racist and sexist, and that's just gonna happen. But obviously, it's gonna be less now that we're adding more things. Well, now that there's more diversity included, though it may not be
yeah,
much, it's a start.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
but
start
in
or
the
something.
first place, it shouldn't be like that. And like, it's a victim. You should just respect that in a way. And like, whatever, like the scientist, whoever is like going through the body, they shouldn't have that opinion on it. They should just look through it if it's like how they were
Perfect
murdered and
world.
whatever. That's it.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but like, my thing is like, in a perfect world, then sexism and racism that wouldn't happen. But it's
Yeah.
not a perfect world. So it had to
Yeah,
start somewhere, and it had to be
every
biased
field would
at
have
some
that,
point.
So you can't just like outlie it by like adding more races or adding more women into it. Like, there's always gonna be those people.
I mean, in a
Well, you
perfect
have to
world.
add
Oh,
those. You have to add those. Oh, sorry, Kyle, you can go.
oh no, like in a perfect world, none of we wouldn't need forensics really because there wouldn't be any crime. There wouldn't be like things we have to worry about like that, like robbery. There would be no conflict in the world.
Yeah,
That's
but
what.
that's too like unrealistic.
Yeah, but you're saying a perfect world, so like
True.
that would
Well,
kind of like
You did say
I'm
that.
saying in a
Yeah.
world without sexism.
yeah,
Well,
but
Well,
that's a perfect world in my book.
yeah.
Honestly, yeah,
But I can
it
see
makes
I understand what she was saying. It's like in theory, that stuff wouldn't
it
exist.
should have never been like
Yeah,
that
exactly.
in the first place. Yeah,
But it's
I
like,
get it.
I
but you
mean,
can't really control like people's like implicit biases because
yeah.
like it's something that's subconscious to them, you know.
I
They're
feel like you also have to look into the idea that not only was this like, okay, yeah, this opened up a field of forensics, but it
yeah,
also made it so people aren't like prosecuted falsely, right? So
Exactly.
like I can guarantee you there's probably like many cases to where it was like just the wrong person. It was just blatantly the
Oh
wrong
yeah,
person,
definitely.
but they had no evidence otherwise. So it was like, well, it's this guy. He did it because
Well,
I can't
gotta
say
be
he
this guy
didn't.
because I
Yeah.
can't say. Yeah,
Exactly.
you have no
But,
evidence to like deny
so
this
many
claim.
people, like, they just judge, like, even the scientists, they just judge without going into like other stuff, like actually doing their work, and they just like, oh, I don't like this person. Maybe it could be like from their race and everything, and they just like misdiagnose and everything like that.
Yeah, that's just.
I mean,
inherent
like if
to-
we're gonna bring the topic back to like the past, like before a lot of stuff, whatever. If we bring it back to like let's say 60s, then yeah, definitely. There was always gonna be something like against people of color or like a certain religion or
Yeah,
a
I feel
woman or
like
a man.
Well,
people
even
should
now
like
though,
hire like without having like a
Yeah, but it's
biased
not as
opinion.
prominent. I mean, it's still there,
I
but
guess. But to Muslim, you're gonna say like I guess you were gonna say the that we should just hire off of like experience rather than race, right?
Yeah,
Is that what
like
you're gonna
no,
say?
yeah,
Well,
exactly, and like without a biased opinion, like you're going into a field where there's gonna be so many types of people. You
well,
can't.
yeah, but like the thing is, like you need to have like a degree for this. You need like an undergraduate. You need to like participate in a program for like to go to this job, and it's like
Yeah,
especially
I
like when
know
you have
that.
like minorities, like like 70% of like the population is white, and then like the rest of it is just an amalgamation of minorities, you know. So it's like there's gonna be like less population of like black people. There's less population of Asian people. So like you need to prioritize those people in like the hiring process to make it feel equal, but it will feel like unequal to like
Prioritize it
white
because
people,
like those are the
you
people
know.
like studying that field, you know. You can't just always like make it into a race thing.
Yeah, of course. Imagine like being like just like for instance, imagine being like a black person, and then you are working the same like time. You're researching the same way as a white person. You're whatever, and then you get to the point where it's like, oh, I'm gonna apply for a job, and it's like, well, somebody got chosen because I'm black and they
of
were
their
white.
skin tone.
Yeah, and it's like, well, we did the same work, basically like the same kind of like intelligence or like level of I don't know, like
Of
skill,
effort
I
or
guess. Yeah,
experience.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then they still got chose or they were chosen over me. That's kind of messed up. That's just messed
Yeah,
up
and
for no
like
reason.
that area already has like like 90% white people working in it.
Exactly.
So it's like that's
Right?
pretty messed up, you know.
Yeah.
Definitely. That I guess we could end it here. We could wind it down. Yeah. So that was the Quarantine Group coming back for another episode of the Quarantine Group podcast.
Forensics.
Yeah, and covering a topic of forensics and the diversity issues and inclusivity issues of people in general all around the world, the United States. That's something that I actually do wonder. Is this like an issue like everywhere? Probably, right?
Yeah,
Most
most
Well,
likely.
likely.
Like I can't
Yeah.
see
Maybe
like
that's
more,
probably
maybe
more
worse
like
in other
white
places.
probably
Exactly.
probably worse in
Yeah.
other places. But we live here, so yeah, that's about it. Thanks for
Good
listening.
Tuning
boy.
in.
All right, thanks for joining us.
Bye.
And thanks for tuning in. Bye.
Boy.